Welcome to New York City. Hi, I'm Megan, a licensed New York City tour guide and founder of Most Marvelous NYC Tour Company. Over the past 10 years, I've been seen on boat tours, bus tours, walking tours, observation deck tours, and on television shows like Mysteries at the Museum. And I thought that I would take my decade of experience to talk about what tour guests have found confusing in New York City. And I wanted to share this with you to help you get your very best New York City experience. But before we get started, make sure that you click subscribe so you never miss a New York Minute.
Yeah, Muffin Talk. Muffin Talk. Muffin Talks, bringing healing to those who need it most.
One of the first things that tourists are confronted with that confuse them is where to stay in New York City. And I completely understand why this would be so confusing, because New York City is quite large and it's full of all of these different neighborhoods that all have very distinct personalities and feels. The basics are that New York City is made out of 5 counties. We New Yorkers like to be different. We call them boroughs. Our 5 boroughs are Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Now, within each of these boroughs, about every 10 minutes that you walk, it can feel like you're in a totally new neighborhood. So where do you stay? In general, I say if it is your very first time visiting in New York City, you want to stay in the borough of Manhattan, and you want to stay south of 96th Street. And I would even go as far to say, in most cases, you want to be south of 59th Street. The reason for this is almost all of the activities that you're going to be doing on your first trip to New York City are going to be in that area, Manhattan south of 59th Street. This is going to save you a lot of time, money, and stress when it comes to getting between attractions and your hotel. So my advice, stay in Manhattan south of 59th Street. I mentioned that New York City has 5 boroughs, but what exactly is a borough? Well, in New York City, they are these geographic areas with their own administrative unit. Each is certainly worth visiting and has tons of attractions and hidden gems. Some highlights of each: up in the Bronx, you have the New York Botanical Garden, you have Yankee Stadium, you have the Bronx Zoo. Queens has the Museum of the Moving Image. You have so much good food, especially if you go to Astoria. You also have the Socrates Sculpture Garden. Brooklyn, which is just across the way, we're literally looking at Brooklyn Bridge Park, which has great food, great shopping. Many people would argue the best pizza in New York City is found in Brooklyn. It's also where you would find Coney Island. And then we have Staten Island, which is off the southern tip of the island of Manhattan. You get there using the Staten Island Ferry, and there are some really good outlet malls there, and I also really love the Alice Austin House Museum. But you're probably going to be spending most of your time, especially if it's your first trip, in Manhattan. That's where you're going to find everything from the jazz clubs of Harlem to Central Park to Times Square to Greenwich Village and the twisty-turny, windy streets, Wall Street, Manhattan's Chinatown, and Little Italy. So you're probably going to be spending most of your time there, but all boroughs have something wonderful to offer. Tourists are often confused about how to actually get to New York City, especially if you're flying. Which airport is the best to fly into? New York City has 3 main airports: JFK, LaGuardia, and then Newark, which isn't even in New York City. It's in New Jersey, but it's actually super close to Manhattan. In terms of which one is the best to fly into, honestly, I would say just look at the prices and the times and find out which works for you. In terms of getting to Midtown Manhattan from any of these airports, there are great public transportation options from all 3, and they're all going to take about the same amount of time. It's going to be between 40 minutes to an hour, depending on the time of day and whatever traffic is doing. Tourists always ask me if it's worth it to get any of the passes. The passes are things like City Pass, New York Pass. Essentially, you pay a price up front, and then these passes give you a bunch of options of attractions that you can see with those passes. And in theory, you could save a lot of money. Now, I have an entire video about City Pass. If you want to really deep dive into that, check that out here. But the short answer of this is, for me, City Pass didn't save me money, but I really, really liked it. What it did was it served as almost my own personal travel agent that set up a few hit star attractions. They tend to be museums, observation decks, and boat cruises. They gave me options every day. I actually rode New York water taxi using City Pass. It was super easy to use to make my pass into a ticket and get on board for a really fabulous harbor cruise. So short answer, I do think the City Passes are worth it if you just want really ease of use for your first time and you're going to go see those major attractions and you don't want any premium experiences. For example, the 102nd floor of the Empire State Building, not included in City Pass, but you do get the really famous 86th floor at the Empire State Building. So we just want, the main highlight attractions, super easy, so you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking. City Pass, New York Pass, all the passes, totally worth it. New York City has 5 different observation decks currently, so it makes sense that tourists would be confused about which one to visit and which one is best. Now, if you want to deep dive into which observation deck is best, I have a podcast called Most Marvelous NYC, and we have an entire episode where we do a really big deep dive. We spend an hour exploring observation decks. But for a really quick rundown, our 5 observation decks are the Empire State Building, Top of the Rock, One World Observatory, Edge at Hudson Yards, and Summit 1 Vanderbilt. I am an observation deck nut. I love them all, and I believe that everyone will enjoy each and every one. But to help you choose which one is best for you, Empire State Building, that is the OG. It is the original of our 5 observation decks. It is perhaps the most classic. It's where all of the movies and television shows were filmed. Everything from King Kong to Sleepless in Seattle to Gossip Girl to Elf. So if you want that classic experience, Empire State Building. Now, a lot of people really want a photo of the Empire State Building, and for that, Top of the Rock would be the best of the observation decks because you're basically face to face with the Empire State Building. They also offer a really good VIP tour, and they have a new experience called The Beam, which is really cool. I have a short about that you can check out. Then you have One World Observatory. That's the observation deck on top of One World Trade Center, the building that replaced the original Twin Towers that were destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. Now, One World Observatory, to me, is the most educational of all of these observation decks because there are tour guides that walk around and they answer your questions. I used to be one of those tour guides. They also give presentations. It's usually about once every 30 minutes, absolutely free once you're in the observation deck. It's also all enclosed, so if it's raining or really windy, it's a great place to be. Then you have Edge at Hudson Yards. This has the highest outdoor observation deck in New York City. It is so expansive, you feel like you are flying. They also have an extra add-on called City Climb, where you actually scale the outside of the skyscraper. I've never done it, I'm way too scared, but if you are a thrill seeker, that's the way to go. And then we have Summit 1 Vanderbilt. That is the newest kid on the block, and if you are in it for the Instagrammable photos and moments, that's the observation deck for you. So I hope that helped give you a quick rundown so you can find your very best New York City observation deck. Packing for New York City can be extremely confusing. I live here and figuring out what to wear on any given day still confuses me. We had a day where it started out at 35 degrees and ended up at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So the thing about New York City is you are going to be spending a lot of time outdoors. One of the reasons for this is we tend to not own cars, so we're not driving from place to place. We're taking public transportation and doing a lot of walking. So you really want to dress for the weather. Check the weather before you travel. Check what it's typically like at the time of year that you're traveling, but then also check like a day or two before you actually fly out, because New York City weather has a mind of its own. If you're traveling in the winter time, I strongly recommend that you get a good coat that is water resistant in case you get caught out in the rain. Also make sure that you bring gloves, hat, scarf, and I really like Uniqlo Heat Tech clothing as an under layer, like thermal underwear to keep you warm. But the most important thing, no matter what time of year you are traveling, bring your comfiest shoes. Just make sure that your feet are super comfortable and super happy, because you are going to be walking, you're going to be walking a lot, and you're going to be walking in the elements. Even if New Yorkers have to go someplace fancy at night, we'll often get our dressy shoes and we'll put it in our bag and we'll walk to the place in our sneakers or comfortable boots and change once we get to the venue. So you definitely want comfy shoes and weather appropriate clothing. And the great news is New York City is so diverse. We have so many different types of style and fashion that you will find here. So you should be able to fit in as long as you are wearing comfortable weather appropriate clothes. Tourists are often confused about what tipping culture is in New York City. New York City is an area where you do want to leave a tip, and there's a lot of people who depend on tips to make a living. This includes wait staff, cab drivers, hotel concierges, massage therapists, hairdressers, tour guides are just some of the people who really need those tips to supplement the amount that they are paid to accommodate the really high living costs in New York City. Now, if you're confused about how much to tip, my general rule of thumb is 20%. No one's going to be unhappy with 20%. People are going to be really happy if you tip 20% of the cost. If you receive really great service, you can always leave more. And if you really believe that the service was bad, you can leave less. But a lot of these professions, especially wait staff, they really aren't paid a living wage. Part of the business model that allows the businesses to exist is that the wait staff is paid something like $2 an hour. So if you don't leave a tip, that person might not be able to eat or pay their rent. So whatever the tipping culture is, wherever you are traveling from, in New York City, you really want to tip. When in doubt, tip, and when in doubt, 20%. Oh, and one more thing. In my opinion, when you travel, you are an ambassador for your country. And when you travel, how you make people feel matters. In New York City, tipping is seen as a very good thing. And if you leave too much of a tip, the worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to make people feel really good. And at least for me, I would much rather be thought of as the person who made someone happy than the person that didn't leave a tip and was the reason why someone couldn't pay their rent. Restrooms, finding them can be very confusing in New York City. Now, when you find them, they're not always open, and it can certainly feel like they are few between and often hiding from us. So whenever I see a bathroom, I take an opportunity to go. But I have a really good piece of advice for you. There is a website and a social media account called Got2Go. Got2Go is an interactive map that has over 2,000 publicly accessible restroom sites that users have found so that you can find a restroom wherever you are in the city. Got2Go has literally been a lifesaver for me because we all deserve the privilege to pee. The subways have got to be one of the most confusing things for tourists visiting New York City. Now, I have a whole video that does a really big deep dive into how to use the subway, and I strongly suggest that you watch it because it will tell you everything that you need to know to navigate our 5 boroughs using the subway. But for the sake of this video, some basics are that the subway, a single ride, costs $2.90. It doesn't matter where you're traveling, what time of day, it's always $2.90. The subways run 24/7 and you can get pretty much anywhere you want to in the 5 boroughs using the subway. Except for Staten Island, because there's a ferry that goes to Staten Island and that's a whole other thing. But within Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, you can use the train. I personally love that the subways currently have a tap to pay feature. That means that you can use your smartphone, your Apple Watch, a credit card to just tap, and it makes swiping so much easier while you're trying to get around. Now, most New Yorkers, we use the subway because it tends to be a fast, reliable, and affordable means of transportation. And in most cases, it's actually faster than a taxi, which can get stuck in traffic. Most tourists are confused when they come to New York City and discover that New Yorkers don't own cars. It's really expensive to own a car in New York City. Parking it can cost more than your monthly rent. It's hard to find parking, so we just don't do it. We use our feet to get around. We use the subway and other modes of public transportation to get around. And the sidewalks are sort of our pedestrian highways. So when you come to New York City, be prepared to walk and use public transportation. A lot of times what is considered walking distance in New York City can be a little bit confusing, in large part because New Yorkers really love to walk. So if something is a mile or a mile and a half away, we'll say, oh yeah, sure, you can definitely walk that. So know for yourself how much you are comfortable walking and make sure that you bring really comfy shoes. And then in terms of knowing how far you're going to be walking, Manhattan's on a grid system. Most of our streets are numbered and divided into what we call blocks. 1 mile is approximately 20 blocks. So if something is 20 blocks away, you're going to be walking 1 mile. Tourists are often surprised to find out how much street food New Yorkers eat. Here's the thing, New Yorkers love good food, but we are often on the go and just don't have the time to sit down to a full meal. So we'll get street food. Another thing about street food is we have some of the best chefs in the city that open up food carts because it's really expensive to open up a brick and mortar store. So if someone has an idea, they'll often get a food truck or a food cart and they'll open it up to see if the idea catches on, and then if it does, they'll open up a brick and mortar restaurant. So we do of course have your classic hot dogs and pizza, but you can also get like a Moroccan meal at a food cart. They are so good, and I encourage you, when you come to New York City, eat our street food. Lady Liberty, she is our national treasure, and yet visiting her can be really, really confusing. We're going to talk about how to buy tickets because that's very important, but the first thing that you need to know is there's only one way to get to her island, Liberty Island, and that is to take a boat. And the one boat that goes there is called Statue City Cruises. It's literally the only boat that's allowed to dock on Liberty Island. The other boats all go near the island, but Statue City Cruises is the only one that docks there. There are no trains or cars that go to the island. You have to take Statue City Cruises. Now, if you want to do a deep dive into visiting the Statue of Liberty, how to have your most marvelous experience, I have a whole video where I literally walk you through step by step everything you have to do, including going to her crown. But right now, we're going to talk about how to buy tickets. My top recommendation for buying tickets is to buy your tickets in advance and to do it online directly from the Statue City Cruises website. That's the only way that you know that you are going to be getting a ticket to Statue City Cruises and that you won't be overpaying. It's also the only way that you can get tickets to the Statue of Liberty's pedestal and the Statue of Liberty's crown. And for her crown, you might literally need to book these tickets up to 4 months in advance. So pretty much as soon as you buy your plane tickets, start checking the Statue City Cruises website to see if you can get Crown tickets. Now, I like to recommend that you buy those tickets in advance online. But if you need to buy the tickets in person, there's only one way to do it, and that is to come here to Castle Clinton. Castle Clinton is located in Battery Park. Now, if we actually walk into Castle Clinton, we'll notice that this is part of the National Park Service. And once we get into Castle Clinton, you will find ticket booths, and inside of those ticket booths, that's where you will be able to buy a ticket in person. Whatever you do not want to buy a ticket from somebody standing around Castle Clinton or somebody standing outside of Battery Park. Oftentimes they'll be wearing vests or jackets, and they'll even potentially show you a license, and they say, oh, we're a licensed seller. Just don't buy your tickets from a man on the street. Don't do it. You want to go in here to Castle Clinton. The reason why the people selling the tickets around the park, they are not part of Statue City Cruises. They are not part of the National Park Service. I have been a tour guide for 10 years, and I have dealt with so many guests who ended up in tears because they overpaid for tickets, and worse, they overpaid for tickets that they thought were going to take them to Liberty Island, but didn't. They were one of the cruises that stops near Liberty Island, and they are great, but if you have your heart set on stepping foot on Liberty Island and you don't get that experience because you bought from somebody who is not actually a Statue City Cruises ticket seller, your heart's going to be broken and you will not have a most marvelous experience. So just say no. They stand outside of Battery Park. It can be very hard as you're walking in. Even today as we were filming this, they were trying to redirect us to their ticket agent salesman, and we had to be really, really firm and say, no, 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 we're going to Battery Park. If you're buying in person, Castle Clinton is your only option. How far in advance should you book New York City attractions? Well, this can be very confusing, and it varies greatly from attraction to attraction. As you can see here, I am at Castle Clinton, where you would purchase your tickets in person to go to the Statue of Liberty, and there are no Crown tickets available today. Now, specifically, the Crown for the Statue of Liberty, you need to start booking those tickets 3 or 4 months in advance because there's only a very limited number of tickets on any given day, and they sell so fast. Now, this is an exception. I find that in New York City, most attractions you can purchase the same day that you want to go visit. The exceptions being the peak travel times. For example, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, spring break that tends to be March, April, and early May, and holidays such as the 4th of July. I would recommend start booking a couple of weeks in advance for those, or any premium experiences. For example, premium tours, restaurant reservations for some of our top restaurants like Per Se or 11 Madison Park. Those can actually book up several months in advance. And if there's a hit Broadway show that you want to see, I strongly recommend that you get those tickets several weeks, if not several months early. But here's the thing about New York City. There is so much to do. There are so many shows, so many attractions, and so many incredible restaurants that if you get here and you're like, oh no, I didn't make a reservation at that amazing famous restaurant, or oh no, I didn't book tickets to Lion King and it's totally sold out, you will still eat amazing food, see amazing shows, and have incredible experiences at New York City attractions. Tourists are often confused to find that New Yorkers, despite being really tough seeming on the outside, we're actually really soft and nice and gooey on the inside. Yes, we have to put on this hard exterior sometimes to live in the big city, but when you actually talk to any New Yorkers, we're usually so excited to welcome you to our city, to help you out if you're confused about anything, if you need directions, if you need a restaurant recommendation. We're often very excited to share our favorite hidden gems in New York City. I hope that this video gave you some ideas for how how you can unconfuse yourself when you come to visit New York City. I would love for my company to give you a tour. If you would like to book, you can visit us at mostmarveloustours.com. And if you liked this video, I have tons of other videos that you can watch, and make sure that you click subscribe because it helps me bring you more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching and have wonderful travels.